22. Book of Oaths. Emilia found herself unable to shake the sense of unease as they arrived at Solace's expansive stone block house. The Patrum's explanation for being at the rendezvous felt far too convenient. If the Order knew of rogue encryptions and downed communications, why hadn't they already sent help to the Reaches? There were simply too many unanswered questions to blindly accept his word as truth, Patrum or not. Terran moved past the stairs and kitchen to follow Solace into the nearby den. The room fit its name, with thickly cushioned furniture and a blazing hearth. She paused in the entrance and caught Terran's arm. "I'm going to go get settled in my room and give you time to talk." He looked surprised for a moment, but quickly nodded. Clearly he thought she'd stay. The moment warmed her. "Second floor, first door on the left," Solace interjected as he backtracked past them. "I'm going to put a kettle on. Stairs are just there." He waved a hand toward the hall. "Thank you." Terran let his hand drift down her arm and squeezed her fingers. "Rest. It's been a long trip. We can make plans in the morning." As if I could sleep, she thought, but she gave Terran a smile before turning for the stairs. The spare room was sparsely furnished, holding only a narrow bed and small table with a dim lamp. A deep armoire sat in the corner, full of old ceremonial robes and spare blankets. The narrow drawers at the bottom were empty, so she dumped the contents of her pack between the two. Absently, she wished for the soft robe she had worn in Rook. Terran had stopped in his tracks at the sight of her in it. Heat filled her face, and she couldn't decide if it was embarrassment or pleasure. Emilia pulled a loose top and cropped pants from the drawer, and a small rectangular gadget fell from a pocket and clattered to the floor. She picked up the familiar device and considered it a moment. Making a decision, she changed quickly and tucked the device in her pocket. It was a scanner, a rather benign piece of tech on its own, but right now she was in the home of a Patrum, and for the moment, unsupervised. In Rickon, Solace had hardly allowed her on their doorstep, let alone welcomed her inside, especially without supervision. Yet, all these years later, here she was. With quiet steps, she slipped through the bedroom door and back onto the landing. Solace had mentioned rogue transmissions. If he was a part of what was going on or had information, she needed it. Everything centered around preventing information from leaving the Reaches. Why? Someone with extraordinary power was manipulating things, and the most obvious culprit was the Order of the Sky, but Terran was bound to the Order, and she would need hard evidence, not paranoia, to sway him. Proof that could be within the Patrum's room. She moved with light steps across the landing to the next set of stairs. She needn't have worried. The stone beneath her feet didn't groan or shift. Stone could withhold and hide. Despite keeping her secrets, she ached for the warmth and telling creaks of wood. Wood was honest. Her bare feet were cold when she reached the top floor and stood before the door of the master bedroom. As expected, it was locked. Emilia popped the face from the electronic keypad with movements born of familiarity and exposed the wiring within. She traced each wire to its source before pulling and rerouting the thin lines. If she set off an alarm, silent or otherwise, it would be rather difficult to explain her actions even to Terran. A soft click sounded, and she opened the door a crack before reversing her work on the small panel and closing it back up. The austerity of the room gave it the appearance of an unused guest suite. The bed, with no extra pillows, had been pushed up against the wall. A simple desk sat in the center of the room, nearly bare but for a datapad and a single book. Along one wall, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books were lined up and meticulously organized. She wondered if her voice would echo if she spoke. If this is what Solace expected of an overseer, it explained why Nox had always been confused when she set their bed with a few extra pillows or traded out the curtains to match the season. His baffled expression had always made her laugh. Her chest ached at the memory as a ghost of a smile pulled at her lips before she refocused on the task at hand. What am I even looking for? Solace had convinced Taryn of his innocence by showing the official orders, but files could be forged. She needed to see them for herself. And if he's working with someone outside the Order? The old patron wouldn't keep such records on the Order's own system. She moved to the shelves and began searching, not the spines or the names printed on them, but the placement and condition of each. She reached the end of the shelf and cursed. There was no sign of a false door or latchbook, no evidence of a frequently pulled volume or facade where evidence could be hidden. Her heart filled with an impending sense of dread. The Order relied on the spoken word under oath for their most sensitive information. What if Solace had sworn himself to those undermining the Reaches? There would be no records. Emilia pulled in an exasperated breath. In that case, if she found nothing, it proved nothing. Not good enough. She needed concrete evidence. Her search took on new intensity, and to her frustration she found no hidden compartments within the stone slab wall, nothing tucked under the mattress rails of the bed, and no loose mortar around the stone tiles on the floor. Disappointed, her eyes settled on the desk, and she snatched up the datapad and plugged in a small drive. The encryption and security fell away, and she stared at the orders Solace had shown Taryn. The thorough account, with multiple signing partners, proved it an unlikely forgery. The Order knew of the communication failings and the likely raids, and had done nothing. It damned them further in her eyes, but would not sway Taryn. He'd trust they were still working for the good of the Reaches. She put the slate back on the desk, ensuring no trace of her search could be found, and sighed. Her gaze caught on the plain-looking book. The once gold-embossed title was worn through, the corners dog-eared and rough. Her eyebrows pinched together in a frown as she moved closer to examine the unremarkable volume. Her breath caught. The Book of Oaths. Those without oaths were forbidden to read its secrets. It held mystical status in Mercurian folklore, often seen as a conduit to the power of the sky herself. It was said wars were fought over single pages of this text before the Order established the overseers. She brushed her hand over the cover and picked up the small book. It was light and thinner than she expected. For all the reverence these words were given, here it sat in casual disregard. Behind the locked door of a patron's private room, she reminded herself. So maybe not quite as casual as it looked. She pulled the scanner from within her pocket and unfolded the thin legs for its stand. With exaggerated care, she opened the book, revealing delicate calligraphy and ornate iconography, and scanned the first pages. Her heart raced. This was not mere trespassing. If discovered, it would be labeled treason, and she could face death. Voices drifted up from the lower floors, and she turned the page, capturing the next lines of text. Clanging in the kitchen made her heart stutter, and she flipped one more page before her nerve gave way. She returned the scanner to her pocket and replaced the book to its same orientation on the desk. A thrill rose through her. It might not be the evidence against Solace she'd hoped for, but within these pages, maybe she could finally understand what held those she loved in such an iron grip. Moving quickly, she backtracked from the room and retreated down the steps. The low murmur of voices in earnest conversation filtered up the stairwell from below. It sounded serious. Curiosity pulled at her as she slipped down the next set of steps in absolute silence. "You didn't," Solace's voice carried with it an undertone of disbelief. "What would you have me do, let her go in front of the conclave and get herself killed?" She heard Solace snort. "As if she would even get that far. What's the girl thinking?" Taryn's voice returned, strained. "As much as anyone who has lost what she has. Logic and grief are rarely twinned." Quiet descended between the two men, and Emilia held her breath, hugging the curved stone wall that edged the stairwell. Solace broke the silence. Trading vows with her was foolish, but you can lay them down. The statement stabbed Emilia. And pull him from me like everything else. That is our plan once returning to Rickon. Terran cleared his throat before stumbling over his next words. But I cannot be the one to break the bond. I extended myself to her. Beyond the bonding oath? The question was sharp, and Emilia flinched at the accusation in his tone, while her own hope flared. Yes, she and I... She is... Terran let out a long breath and started again. I can't be the one to leave her. Solace seemed to be fuming, his anger barely contained. How could you, Terran, to put yourself in such an untenable situation? He choked out. If she were to take advantage of your vow... The words caught in Emilia's mind. Take advantage? What power did Solace possibly think she held? Extended myself to her. A sudden urge to retreat and read the forbidden pages in her device and understand the subtleties of their bond filled her, but instead she strained to hear Terran's response. His voice came through, low but earnest. I wasn't thinking clearly. It shouldn't have happened, but I trust her. A punctuated silence followed, the crackle of the hearth filling the void. Solace finally let out a heavy sigh. For your sake, I hope that trust is not misplaced. First Nox and now you. I cannot lose you both. Lose Terran? To her? He sounded almost fatherly. The care in his voice held far more emotion than she'd expect. The bond between Nox, Terran, and their patron had always been a mystery. To her, Solace reflected the order. Unyielding and harsh, she'd witnessed some of the training he'd put Nox and Terran through as boys, but he was also the only father Nox had ever known, and had been revered as such. Even for Terran, whose own father still lived, he looked to Solace. How is the vow working upon you? Terran gave a wry chuckle and huffed. Unexpectedly. I only wanted to protect her, but now you are drawn to her. That's an understatement. The words dripped with self-loathing. Oaths are power, damnable boy. How many times did I say it? Oath-torn as you are, it will only get harder. Guard yourself. You will need to keep her at a distance. She must be willing to release you when the time comes. A stab of pain lanced at her heart. Why did that thought hurt? It echoed the very argument she'd used to convince Terran to say the words in the first place. The image of Terran kneeling before her brought sudden tears to her eyes, and she blinked them away, trying to catch the rest of the conversation through the conflicting emotions. What's done is done. Solace's grave tone grated at her. His every word sat in her gut like a bitter poison. But you cannot bring Emilia to the Order. It's too dangerous for both of you. What, I tell her she came for nothing? We exchanged oaths for nothing? All the better if she drops your bond now. You tell her whatever you need to keep her safe, to keep yourself safe. She's a spark among tinder. She came to petition for Nox to join the Hall of the Fallen. Solace's voice turned hard. That cannot happen. Why? Terran asked. He deserves at least that much. His worth is not the question, Solace said, sounding tired. But now is not the time, and Emilia is not the priority. You must see this. How dare you? Terran growled. She could hear a tremor in his voice and the low threat it held. Emilia's heart leapt at the sound. Terran, Solace snapped. Enough! Your vow to Emilia is overruling your good sense. He let out an exasperated sigh. The Reaches need their overseer. You would do well to remember that if you fail, there will be many more widows before this is all over." Silence filled the room for so long Emilia held her breath, sure any sound would betray her presence. Someone shifted in their seat. "Yes, Patron," Terran said, his tone resigned. A violent stab of jealousy shot through her, painful as any grief. She was losing him already. The Order would take Terran from her like they had robbed her of Nox and twisted her mother's loyalty. Emilia retreated up the stairs, suddenly desperate to read the pages she'd copied. Moments later, with the door closed behind her, she climbed onto her bed and plugged in the device to her data slate. The precise script flowed in tight lines across the page. Hungrily, her eyes scanned through the formal language. These first pages she had captured seemed to be brief overviews of oaths, touching on various aspects of the life of both overseer and acumen. She flipped past a page regarding acolytes, searching for anything that could pertain to their circumstance. The primary oath to the sky was a mysterious bond, and the source of an overseer's supernatural power. The oath had to be coupled with the extensive list of restrictions called assurances. Standard knowledge, really. Emilia found herself drawn into the text, reading details she'd never known, even growing up alongside Nox and Terran. When an avowed came of age, the sky would give them one of two gifts. The gift of strength was given to those she wanted as overseers. The gift of administration was given to those who she would accept as acumen. She'd assumed each avowed chose their own path. She'd always heard reference to the conclave, but never understood the full structure. Consisting of 28 members of each discipline, it was from these 56 members that elders were elected. If they chose to accept the posting, they would lay down their original vows and take up new oaths, granting them separate gifts to help them lead. She snorted at that. The elders are more foolish than the rest combined. The pages went into much more detail about the limitations of each oath, but Emilia found herself lost in the language. Reiterated over and over was the fact that each oath was a combination of intent and action. When employed together, they came into their full strength. Are we only bound by intent? The vow already connected them beyond ordinary time and circumstance. Did they need more than lives and purpose entwined to be fully bound? With a huff, Emilia leaned back into the wall and tipped her head to the ceiling. In Nox and Terran, she'd witnessed the good the power of the sky could bring. She'd also seen those she loved suffer in the sky's name. Could we use the power of the sky's own oaths to protect each other from the Order? If their bond outstripped loyalty to the bureaucracy surrounding them, maybe they could bring true change. Terran could be free. Emilia lifted the slate and reread one of the very first pages. Every oath bears an assurance. What is the assurance of our bond? If she could strengthen their oath, maybe together they could unravel the truth of what was happening here in the capital, and she wouldn't have to face it alone.